What's up, everybody? This is Concrete Zebra, and today we're going to be going through how to make 90s boom bap swing in Studio One. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Concrete Zebra. Keep it simple, don't be basic. We're back with another tutorial. This one's going to be on how to make 90s boom bap swing inside Studio One. And to start that off, I'm going to need you guys to go ahead and do something for me to follow along with this. If you follow this annotation here, it is going to take you to a forum post inside the Studio One forum. Now, this is really easy to do. Just go do it. You're going to love it. All you got to do is follow the instructions, and it's going to show you how to download some MPC groove templates from the Studio One Exchange server, and it's really easy. It's all done inside Studio One. You don't have to go to another website. So anyhow, I want to start by talking a little bit about what a groove template is, why you might use them. Now, when you go ahead and you program something inside of Studio One, and say you want to use eighth notes, like or 16th notes, you set a resolution to your grid, and then it'll give you, that amount of notes inside one bar. This is 16th notes, for example. But what happens is when you go ahead and you start clicking them in, they wind up stuck exactly to the grid, and it's where we get the term computerized or robotic, because the hits come at exactly that mathematically precise time point. Now, nothing in the world plays music like that except for computers. Every human hand has their own different little inconsistencies and different nuances, that gives each individual player their own rhythm, and that's human, and it's natural to us, and that's why we connect with it, and that's why it sounds good. Like computer music, it sounds good too, don't get me wrong. I love quantized music. I have no problem with it, but if you want to create something different inside of a computer, you're gonna need some help. That's where a groove template comes in. So if you went ahead and downloaded that stuff, what you're going to wind up having is the ability to use the swing from an MPC 3000, an MPC 1000, or an SP 1200. Now, back in the 90s, there was kind of like a holy war between the samplers. Like, were you an SP 1200 guy, or were you an MPC guy? Both boxes made, incredibly fucking awesome hip hop records. Looking back on it, it was kind of cheesy. The beef was, people thought that the SP 1200, because it was an earlier model, this will probably sound familiar to you guys, because it was an earlier model, it was more authentic. They got it right with that one. The MPC was too rigid, the quantizing was too clean, it didn't have the real swing. And if you've been following hip hop production for any amount of time, you know that MPC wound up coming out on top on that one. So anyhow, the groove template that I'm going to be using is going to be the MPC 3000. I'm partial to it. It was my first piece of gear. It's what the swing settings is what people nowadays call the Kanye swing. It's what he started using before he was really into the ASRX and his newer methods now. But I went ahead and loaded up that groove template, and the way that you access those groove templates is, if you look on your your bar right here, you have different drop down menus. You have one for silent stripping, you have one for audio bending, and you have one for quantize. Now, you can use 5 different quantize settings inside of one session. So that's what these buttons are for. So I went to A, and I picked a pretty aggressive swing setting, 73%. And what that means is your notes are going to be swung 73% to the right, 73% ahead of the beat. So when you go ahead and quantize something like that, You go ahead, select it here. It'll come up. It'll come up in this quantize menu as well. Just highlight what you want to quantize, and you hit Q. Now, if you saw that, um, it was just a very subtle move in some of these notes. You're gonna have to zoom in to see what it really did. So like for example, right here, it bumped this one off the grid a little bit. Okay, and just if you know when you're looking at it, this one it bumped it really far off the grid. And if you're just looking at it zoomed out, you're not really gonna see it that much. And what it is these boxes, specifically the MPCs, they had something that was called jitter, and it would play the MIDI notes back, slightly off the grid at different points in time. And what the Studio One program allows us to do is, if you go ahead and you're meticulous enough and you want to sample, all these different timings and then import them back into Studio One, you could do that. Somebody's already done that hard work for us. So that jitter, it would create a vibe and almost like a human-like aspect to the drums, at least more human than what we're used to hearing today from straight on the grid. And because this was what everybody was using, this sound became the the swing, the rhythm of 90s hip hop was these different rhythms. So in order to replicate that sound, we're going to need to use this swing, and we're going to need to make sure that we keep that spirit in mind. So the first thing I laid down was my kick pattern. Okay, and we're going to start out going through the drums in this track. So all I did was program a quick little 2-bar loop. Since I already had it in my head that I was going to be making this 90s style track, I went into my sample library and I found this kit that I bought that I don't really use a lot, because I don't make a lot of 90s East Coast stuff. It was the Drum Broker. I think it's drumbroker.com. Havoc released some of his drums, and I was really excited about that because he's one of my favorite 90s producers. I love his sound. I listened to a lot of Mobb Deep stuff before Jay-Z put him on the Summer Jam screen and ruined my whole perception of them as a teenager. But yeah, I was really into Mobb Deep. Still love the sounds, and this was the kick that I found. And you see, it's already got that 90s quality. What's that is coming from is that tail at the end. It's like a airy type of quality that comes from sampling off of vinyl. Next, I moved on to the snare. Same kit, just. And if you notice, I also used the 73% swing on that. So for the snare, I used the same kit. I picked the first snare, it wound up sounding good. I used the same quantized settings. If you zoom in, you can see that they're just the slightest bit off the grid. And as we start to introduce more drum sounds, you're gonna really see the magic of this template. All right, then I brought in a straight eighth note hi-hat. It was a pretty popular rhythm back then. This is what you wind up having. So next I brought in a eighth note straight hi-hat. It was a pretty popular rhythm back then, and this is what you wind up having on this one. See, so you hear already. Off the rip, like that is a banging drum loop. Like it has that crisp knock. It's the swing is perfect. You can't do anything but bob your head. I went ahead and put put an open hi-hat before the snare. That was another popular technique. As you can see, it's the same quantized effect. This time it pulled it ahead of the beat. So this is what you got all together. Yeah, son. Yeah, son, that's the track, son. That's that fire, son. Word. Yes, you already see like that. It's already bringing that vibe out. Now, if you go ahead, just to make the point, I'm gonna take all these drums and I'm gonna go ahead and quantize them straight to the grid so that you could compare the difference. You hear how much more robotic this one feels? Like there's no, there's just, it doesn't give you the head nod that pushing those kicks ahead in the beat really gives you. One more time, just to drive the point home. The first one you're going to hear is with the swing. The second is without the swing. Okay, so once I had a solid drum loop, um, I liked it, but I wanted to keep it simple, but it can't be basic. So I wanted to find something to kind of turn the drums around on the fourth bar, and I just wound up going through that same kit. That kit's awesome, man. And I found this little this roll. Now, that was just drug out of the kit, no time stretching. If you look at it on the piano roll, you could see it's hitting ahead of the beat. And upon first instinct, if you're used to making quantized music, you might want to stretch that out so that you wind up getting it on the beat or whatever. And you don't really want to do that when you're making 90s stuff. They just back then they would chop a sample and just use their ears to kind of fit it into the beat. And that's if you want to make something that sounds real authentic, and take somebody back in that vibe, you want to stay away from time stretching stuff so that it's exactly on the grid. The next thing I moved on to was making the bass. A real simple technique for making 90s hip hop bass is just put bass notes wherever your kicks land. And when you listen to my bass line, that's the typical head nod vibe, that was popular. It's more of a hard underground sound. The bass lines weren't particularly musical. There were different techniques that people would use. Sometimes they would, filter the bass line and just lay it over the sample and turn it up. Sometimes, they would have a sample and they would just crank an EQ on the bottom end of the sample and call that the bass line. I don't like to do that. I like to filter out the low end and make a bass line like this. The way that I do it, easy is if you click a MIDI region of your kicks, and then you press shift and click where you're gonna make a new MIDI region and click where you're gonna create your bass, you'll be able to see your kicks, but then you can also click in your bass notes. So it makes it real easy that way. You just click here, click here, click here, click here. And if you see, there's not a lot of movement in my bass line. It's three notes. you know. And most of the stuff back then, it was 2 or 3 notes, because what you would do is you would have a sample of, you know, a bass tone, or you would go through the record and find a open bass note, and you would go ahead and sample that. And then there was a function in the MPC where you could click a pad, and then you could send it into this function called 16 notes, and it would take that that one sample that you had, and then pitch it up and down, you know, 16 different times. So you would have, so that one sample would then be 16 different notes. You know, you'd have 2 octaves that you could play of that sample, and that's how people would play bass lines, man. You know, a lot of people just had MPCs; they didn't have sound modules, so you'd have to be really creative with your you know, with your sampling and with your sound design. The next thing I did was I moved on to the sample. At first, I was just gonna do a drum tutorial and stop there, but you know, once I got those drums going, man, I was like, dude, this is fun. So let me go ahead and just blow out a whole track. You know, just do something special for everybody. And you know, I was a tremendous Wu-Tang nerd growing up. I had all their shit, and I went and I seen this this sample pack of all the Wu-Tang samples, and I had this idea that I was just going to, you know, take these samples and put trap drums over them, and you know, maybe do like instrumental tape or Wu trap or something like that. I started working on it. I got a couple of those beats out to people. They really like them. I'm waiting on a couple records back. But so I had this you know, we had this sample. So I figured that would be easy enough to chop up. And if you look at what I got right here, this is not an export from a sampler, rather. All I did was I literally just took the sample, brought it into the session, just like that. And then what I did was I listened for a part that I wanted to try to chop a 1-bar part so I could play it over and over again. So I think I wound up chopping it right here. And then what I wound up doing was time stretching it a little bit. I'm holding down Alt, click and hold. So then I got this bar. Okay, then I copied and pasted that 3 times, holding down Alt and dragging to copy. And then I knew on the 4th bar I needed to turn around, and what I did was I just wound up dragging the sample out, not time stretching it, but you know, I still have the original sample there, dragging it out to see just to see what happened. I got lucky; it wound up sounding okay. So, that turned into the sample for the track. So we wound up with this. What I wound up doing at first was adding a couple filters to kind of, there's a hi-hat in the sample that I'm sure you guys heard before. So I needed to filter that out so that it wasn't messing with the rhythm of the hi-hat that I have playing. I just took a low cut filter, the LC, and you know, turned it up to 260 hertz, got rid of all the low end. That way I could play my own bass line. These samples from older records, they did a lot of panning, a lot of extreme panning. So what I do is I'll bring up the dual pan, I'll link the channels, change the width and the pan to center. That way I turn the signal into mono. And I still had some of that low end that I didn't like. So what I wound up doing was going into FabFilter Pro and turning the mid side channel mode on and putting another filter on top. This is another filter that I use to kind of take the some more of the lows out, and then I put a regular bell curve and raise some of the middle frequencies up in the 500 area just to give the sound some more body because I was losing a lot of the sound, and then it wound up sounding like this. Put some reverb on it for some ambiance. I mean, you could tell that's that's a pretty fucking mean sample right there. But I still felt like I needed to kind of bolster the low mid section a little bit, thicken up the sound. So what I did was, I'm keeping in mind to keep it simple. Don't be basic. If this was 94, this beat right here, I mean, that shit would go. I could sell it to anybody. Anybody. If you had connects in the industry, you could sell that beat for $30,000 in '94. But nowadays it's not '94, and I just have a higher standard for myself. I keep it simple. Don't be basic. Push. Try to do something great. So one of the techniques I use when I want to come up with a melody is I'll close my eyes, I'll turn my monitor off, and I'll just listen. Sometimes we get so caught up in looking at the computer screen, you forget to listen, man. So I'm just sitting back, I'm listening, and this melody came in my head. It sounded like this. I just started humming that along with the sample, and I was trying to figure out what kind of instrument I was going to use when it comes to 90s hip hop. You don't really want to go to anything too crazy. You want to kind of stay traditional. A safe instrument to thicken stuff up is always an EP. An EP is always going to sound good no matter what. It just will. It's awesome. It works in any genre. So I went into Omnisphere and I picked a more exotic EP. And when I was placing it in the mix, I had it up higher. And what I wanted to do was I closed my eyes and I turned the sound down until I could just barely hear it because I didn't want it up front. So what you do when you do something like that with one sound and you push it so far back that you could barely hear it, but your ear picks it up, is you start to create more and more layers in your mix. You create volume layers, and you want quite a few of those. You don't want, everything stuck at 2 or 3 volumes. It's going to make your mix deeper. It's going to make it more complex, and it's going to make it sound better. The next thing that I added was, because I used the Wu-Tang sample, it's sounding like super RZA shit. So I went ahead and I decided to go full RZA, and I went into Omnisphere and I just typed in bells and chimes. I found something that said Chinese. It wound up sounding like exactly what what we needed, and we came with this. And I just wanted something that would kind of, turn the beat around, let you know that it's the end of the loop. So that wound up working perfect. Wound up with something super old school New York. I could have just for the hook took a simple synth and played a little 2 or 3 note melody, but we're gonna keep it simple, but we're not gonna be basic. That was I can do better than that. You could keep going. So a very simple method of not being basic and keeping things fresh in your beats, especially if you're sampling, is I just took the sample for the hook and I reversed it, dude. Like, it's always a cool effect. So I wound up with this. So once I had that, I'm thinking like, wow, that sounds really creepy. So what I went ahead and did was I grabbed some vocal stabs that I have inside one of my kits. This one came from Beat Generals. It's a kit of nothing but vocal chants. A very useful kit. If you want to get it, you got to be a member to their site. You should check them out. It's not for everybody. I love it. I use it. So I just added, some delays. This is from my template tutorial. I just added the delays. And that's why it's good to have your sends already set up, because you don't gotta think a bunch. You just, oh, I want to ping pong, I want to echo, boom boom, it's there. And then what I did was I changed the drums a little bit. I just wound up taking out the kick that was here, to kind of make them a little slower. The snare stayed the same, and then I instead of using an 1/8 note hi-hat run, I used a 1/4 note, and I wound up with this. So when I was trying to figure out how to transition back to the verse, the first thing I tried is I just cut the last half a bar out. Found a little reverse transition symbol that I had. Came up with this. All right, so that sounded nice. So once I had my verse and my chorus done, I copied 16 bars, and then went ahead into arranging my verse, so that the shit didn't sound basic. I wanted, I got to keep driving this point home. You have to switch your sounds, no matter how subtle. Even if it's just taking a kick, adding a kick, putting a snare roll, switching up a hi-hat, but every 4 bars in your tracks, in your verses, you have to change something. Otherwise, people are going to tune out. They're going to listen to your beat for 12 seconds. They're going to turn the volume down. They're going to ask you where you want to go to eat, or if you want to roll a blunt, or if you want to play 2K. It happens all the time. And the reason why is you're not making your arrangements interesting enough, you know? It's not because, you know, the world's a hater and they don't understand your art and if they only made beats. No, you don't make beats for people who make beats. You make beats for people who listen to music. And it's your job to keep them interested. So the way that you do that is you change something every 4 bars. So here's the first 4 bars of my instrumental. The first thing I did to make them different was I took the hi-hat out. Easy method. I added the open hi-hat every bar so that there was still something driving the rhythm. So as you can hear in the second 4 bars, I brought the hi-hat back in, and then you know, because you're coming up on your 8th bar, that's the halfway point through the verse. I went ahead and I dropped the drums except for the snare, to kind of give the rapper a place, you know, just to say something dope on their 8th bar and really highlight their lyrics. And if you're working with rappers where you're just sending them MP3s, you're gonna want to do stuff like this because it's gonna make them love your beats. And if you put a drop on like the last 8 bars, on the last bar of the 8 and the last bar of the 16, you know, rappers when they write their verses, they always have a really clever line at the end of their 8 and at the end of their verse. So if you drop out the instruments and then they're lit and then they're, you know, they're rapping and then they do it and then there's a drop out there for them already, they're gonna love your beats and they're gonna buy more from you because they're ego driven and you're gonna make them sound good. So anyhow, this is what this part sounded like. For the third set of 4 bars, since I hadn't used just the straight loop together, I figured this would be a good time to bring in all the elements. And then on the last set of 4 bars before the verse, what I did was I created a drop in the beginning of the verse. Instead of doing it at the end, I did it at the beginning, and it was a pretty common technique in the 90s. All you got to do is just cut everything out before the first snare. That way the snare comes. The snare is the first percussion instrument that you hear. Sometimes you could cut the sample out too, but I didn't like the way it sounded when I did it. And yeah, rappers just love this shit. And you can hear why. And as you can hear, I changed that hi-hat section too, just switched it up to a quarter note hi-hat section. That way when the drop hit, the intensity of the drums kind of went down, and then I pick it back up with putting the regular hi-hats in, and then I added a drop at the end before the chorus. That way it transitions smooth. So the last thing I added was this say sample, and that was just because when the chorus was turning around previously, it was sounding kind of clunky, so I needed something like an impact, but I didn't want to use an impact symbol or an impact sample, I'm sorry, or a cymbal crash or something like that. I wanted to keep it a little darker, and this is what it sounded like. You know, that's pretty much it. So I'll give you guys an opportunity to listen to this track real quick. that's pretty much it. It's that simple to put something like this together. It's just, one, you got to have a quality sample to start out with. Two, you got to make sure that you go get these groove templates. You got to make sure that you know how to apply them. Three, you want to make sure that you have, quality vinyl sampled drums, and they're everywhere now. They're easy enough to get. I think this kit that I got, it cost me like $30 or something, and it's usable. I can use this in anything. Just put your transitions in, keep it simple, don't be basic. This is Concrete Zebra with Craft Master Productions, and I'll see y'all on the next one.